they weren't just customers. They were my family and friends, because for me, the whole experience and the whole thing about cooking is how my mum approaches it. It's about nourishment and nurturing. It's our connection with family, friends, and the community.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. It's the summer series, and today we have a Deep in the Weeds favourite, an all-round legend, David Tsirekis. David, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, getting ready for the summer months ahead.
What's the last sort of couple of years been like for you? You've had some big changes, but what are you up to now?
Look, as you know, I attempted to rebirth Parama, but unfortunately, that didn't go to plan. As you know, I had a stroke in 2019, and I hadn't fully recovered because, stubborn me, I just kept on working, and contrary to medical advice, it was regressing the repair, the physical repair of the permanent damage that I had from having the stroke. And so putting myself into situations that weren't helpful, both mentally, spiritually, and physically, only made matters worse. And the doctors gave me an ultimatum saying that if I kept on this path, that I'd have early onset Alzheimer's by 55. So that was 2 years away. That's how serious it was. So I took a couple of months off. I was lost. I actually threw out all my chef's jackets after Parama 2.0 because of how the difficulty I had in dealing with that situation, mentally, spiritually, and physically. I threw out all my night set, and I really didn't want to get back into cooking. I even got a job at DHL as a dispatch, but then the doctors were seeing that I wasn't healing quickly enough, and they were encouraging me to get back into what I love the most, because it helped with the healing. And they found that whenever I did that kind of work, and when I was in a good headspace and in a good environment, the healing was a lot quicker. So the neuroplasticity was moving at a faster rate than it was with me being at Parama 2.0, where I was going backwards, where, I was declining in mental health.
So how have you got yourself back in the kitchen and doing the things that you love? What does that look like?
Well, it actually is a lot of thanks has to go to Danny Russo at Rossellini Group, who encouraged me to get back in, and he was very delicate and tender with me. Danny. But he had his usual moments of sort of get the stick out, but really he was encouraging, he was compassionate, he was helpful, and he just got me into Rossellini Group and just helped me with creative. He wanted me to be creative with him, and giving me projects to help that side of the creativeness that was important, that the doctors were saying was going to help me heal a lot quicker. And then he got me onto working on the Sala dining project. So I helped him come up with a whole bunch of recipes. We tested them. I costed up his whole menu. I did all that sort of stuff in the background while the chefs and the team, the cooking team, did all the sort of the physical and hard work, and the creating. And then I just did all the, sort of the number crunching, the recipe development, and then the testing with them all. And then I started getting my excitement up, and then some offers come from overseas to do some consulting in Europe and back in Chicago and Milwaukee, and we're back to where we were 2018 when I hit a new sort of stride when I hit consulting, and I was working for the Greek Club, Zeus, Chicago, and other groups, and I'm in a better space now.
You've done a lot of traveling. Do you have any sort of travel food stories that sort of had an impact on you that you can share with us?
Look, do you know one of the big things that I noticed, and I don't want to poo-poo the rest of the world and their cuisines, and we all sort of beat our chests for Australia and how good we are culinary wise. But when you go overseas, when you see the vast differences of Australian chefs and the local chefs, and the way they play with different palates and fuse different cuisines or nail certain cuisines, I think it has to do with our exposure here in Australia to such a wide variety of cuisines and ethnic-driven cuisines, and from accessibility from sort of a $5 hit up until fine dining. So we do that really, really well. Whereas everywhere else I've experienced, especially the US and Europe, it's a little bit hit and miss. It's kind of like where we are, where we were in Greek food, I'd say 10, 15 years ago, and where we kind of still are somewhere, is the Greeks in Greece have developed and evolved far faster than the Greeks here, the old generation Greeks who are still presenting 60s and 70s style food. And that goes with Europe in the way they present Southeast Asian cuisines, Mediterranean cuisines, Middle Eastern cuisines. But then you've got these Australians, like you go to LA, and then you've got Monty Kalidrovic, and the vast differences of his food to the local chefs are miles apart. He's just doing some amazing things. And where it hit me mostly was when I was in the Netherlands early this year, and we were visiting a few cafes for breakfast, and they were all very standard traditional things. Benedict, your traditional European continental style breakfast, very sort of simple. Not to say that there's anything wrong with it, but then we walk into this one place called Box Social, and the moment you sit down, you kind of get a feeling like you've walked into a cafe in Melbourne, Lygon Street, or wherever, or here in Marrickville, or Newtown, or Edmore, and you look at the menu, you taste the food, and you think, "Wow, this is." This feels like we're in Australia, you don't experience this kind of food anyway. And then you hear some noise in the background, and then you hear, "G'day, mate," and and then it's run by an Australian, and then you see the menu further. Then they've got things like chickens. They were the first to introduce a chicken palmy, right? In the Netherlands, right? And they do it traditional pub style. Now, these guys work with a big pub group here in Australia, and they left just before COVID, and they put the names of 10 cities into a hat, and that's where they were going to go and start bring the sort of the Australian gastropub experience to Europe. And lo and behold, they chose the Netherlands. And here I am. I walked into this one cafe, and it was just mind-blowing. And that's what I notice everywhere amongst when you travelled throughout Europe. And now the Aussies are starting to pop up in the Middle East. And of course the US, where you see just a vast difference of, sort of subtlety and finesse that Australians are really well known for, whereas the Americans are all about, 25 hits, 30 hits on a plate. It's just, the more grandeur the plate, the more, sort of fine dining it is sometimes. And then you go to Europe, and then it's the other end of the spectrum where it's just simple, as traditional as you can get without, sort of breaking any formula. And then you got these Aussies who know how to sort of walk that tightrope and be clever, delicate, and use such finesse with ingredients and the way they present and evolve, sort of classic dishes of, sort of foods of the world. I just think we're just incredible at this skill because of the exposure that we've had from a very young age of every ethnic cuisine under the sun, and at all levels. So that's the one thing that I noticed more than ever on these trips this year.
It's summer at the moment. Is there any ingredient that really stands out for you that sort of represents summer, and how do you use it?
I just for summer, I think it's just about for me is keeping flavors clean and fresh. And not overpowering. I don't know. I don't have a particular ingredient. I'm enjoying working with tahini a lot more. I just like the balance that you can get with lemon, parsley, fennel, mustard, and utilizing that in dressings or cooking fish in it to give it that extra meaty flavor to it. I'm of all things, I'm enjoying just making just a simple cheese toasty and just getting sort of textures right. Whether it's the right moment to take it off the grill so the cheese doesn't completely dissolve, separate it. You want to hold it together a little bit, a little bit of texture, sort of getting the bread nice and crisp whilst remaining fluffy further down, just, I don't know.
I totally get it. I know the melted cheese toast conundrum, and when you get it right, it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's just like even just putting things, things like a mustard and kimchi. Just simple combinations like that. Sort of sweet and sour. Sort of bitter and sweet and all these things, just having a quick meal because the heat, it's getting hot and time, times of an essence these days, and so it's just like one of those quick meals that you can have with the leftovers. That's probably been my biggest use of ingredients is is utilizing leftovers because, as we all know, things are a little bit tougher financially for us all these days, especially if you're in the hospitality industry. And so utilizing things the next day and making a second or a third meal out of what you've done. And then that way it's giving you an extra chance to play with food combinations and techniques and textures and stuff like that, in a different setting than what you've done the night or the day before when you cook that ingredient. So, I think I've never been one to focus on one ingredient. Just trying to be open and respectful of all ingredients and playing around with them and understanding how they react under different circumstances or different techniques and incorporating just a little bit of science, not molecular gastronomy science, just pure basic sciences of, understanding the proteins, the sugars, and anything else that reacts with other ingredients that we add to the dish, So, yeah.
What are you loving about sort of this re-emergence into hospitality and food, and what are you looking forward to over the next sort of year?
Me, I just want to. I'm just sort of trying to find myself again, sort of reacquaint myself with the love of cooking that I've always felt that is important to me, and what made me the person I am. Let's be honest, I've never made any money through cooking, but I've been fulfilled with the process of cooking of sort of after 20 years. Again, that was one of the hardest things with Pyramid 2.0 is that 20 years I built up so much goodwill and connection with customers, and they weren't just customers. They were my family and friends, because for me, the whole experience and the whole thing about cooking is how my mum approaches cooking. It's about nourishment and nurturing. It's our connection with family, friends, and the community, and that's always been probably my downfall financially, is because that's the way I think about it first, rather than the financial returns. And so I'm trying to get back to that part. I'm trying to get my soul and my head back into that space again by spending a bit more time with my family again. I mean, my dad's 93, mum's 90. They're still cooking. My dad's still gardening, still planting the cucumbers. He's now moved to vertical farming because he's learning some new tricks and learning how to utilize more space to get more cucumbers up the side of his house rather than a little patch in the backyard, right? He can go higher, but but he's not so mobile. He can get up a ladder and pick them anymore. And then my mum too, just learning those skills from her mother and applying them in cooking. I think that's where a lot of cooking is going, back to those simple, sort of peasant days, but produced with a little bit of finesse and cleanliness on a plate if it's in a restaurant situation. And so I've done a few pop-ups, and that's how I'm approaching a lot of those pop-ups, is using a lot of sort of village traditional recipes, but make them contemporary and accessible in a modern setting, and perhaps relatable to not only just the Greek culture, but also other cultures. So, for example, in the last pop-up, I did as a signature Greek dish, avgolemono, which is a chicken which is in a soup, and the stock is then emulsified with egg and lemon for it to be thickened and sort of a little bit more, thicker in texture, I should say. So and normally you have it in the soup with noodles. You have some broken noodles in there or broken rice, right? Well, I thought I'll omit the noodles and the rice, but I'll make a chow mein. So I served it chow mein style. So using the chow mein noodles, the crispy noodles, and then ladling the chicken in the sort of the gelatinous soup that you get when you get a combination chow mein, right? And then the liquid doesn't actually dissolve or melt the noodles, but it just coats them enough to sort of retain their crispiness, but then get a little bit of soft and absorb a little bit of those flavors from the liquid. And that was probably the most popular dish I served in the recent pop-ups, because it still reminded people of Greek food, but then it challenged their perceptions and they were saying, that it also reminds me of that great Chinese meal somewhere else, So it was like combining a chicken and sweet corn soup, but minus the sweet corn, and putting egg and lemon, and noodles, but giving it a distinctive Greek flavor, but having it playful. And again, I think food has to be more accessible, not to just your own ethnic group, or it has to be accessible to everybody now, more than ever, because we've got Uber, we've got supermarkets providing more sort of polished and better quality meals to take home and open up, and it's ready in 10 minutes. So that's what we're up against now in the hospitality industry. We have to become more accessible to everybody, because it's being taken away from us, from the supermarkets and Uber, right? Because of its accessibility to a greater audience and at a cheaper price, right? That's where I'm at the moment with cooking. Sorry if I've gone on a bit there.
Well, that's what we love about you, David. It's great to hear you back on the pans and back doing what you love, and very much looking forward to seeing what you do over the next year or two. Great to catch up again. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks very much for your show. It's and it was I spent 2 months in Chicago and Milwaukee, where I opened up another restaurant. Help open up another restaurant in Milwaukee with the group that I've worked with, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, the basketball guy. And I was listening to you guys because I felt I was displaced in Milwaukee, home of Happy Days and the Fonz and Laverne and Shirley and lots of beer. Oh, here's one thing I got to put in just before I go. Milwaukee is like this giant new town city. Imagine wow. New town that had 2.5 million people. That's Milwaukee. So wow. If you guys ever get a chance to go, you got to go to Milwaukee. It's a really up and coming, burgeoning city, aka new town on steroids.
Wow, got to put that on the list. David, you're a legend, mate. Have a great year, and we'll catch up soon.
Cheers, brother.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds podcast. or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.